Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome back to the first episode of the New Year's, episode 23 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Jake Burdett, joined by my other co-host, Hiruy. How you doing, Hiruy?
Hey, Jake. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, no, as I said, first one of the new year. And interestingly enough, though, we're going to be talking about something that happened last year. And admittedly, we are a little bit late here. We're doing a recap of the election results, mainly with a focus on Howard County of the 2022 general election. A lot of interesting, surprising, and even late results in that race with some sort of long to medium term implications. And Hiruy and I were working very closely with at least one of the candidates, Joan Pontius in the 5th District. So should be a good discussion here.
Yeah, I think it should be a good discussion. Like you said, Jake, we meant to do this right after the election, but a few things happened that required our focus, and we will probably touch on that today as well. But if we can sum up the outcome in one word, I would say it's status quo. Nothing much changed, and I think there are implications from that we will touch on as well. And of course, there, even though it is status quo, there is still some things to be to be happy about and to be positive about. So we'll touch on that.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with Hiruy's short analysis there, and to highlight on some of the more races, more specifically, really when Hiruy mentions the status quo and not much has changed, that's particularly true at the county level. I guess we could start first with the county executive race. And with that, of course, it was the incumbent Calvin Ball, who, Democrat had taken, I think $700,000-800,000 worth of money from developers and special interests, and some grassroots donations mixed in there as well, outside of the $700,000-800,000. But he was the incumbent, and what was very interesting about the whole dynamic of the race is he was running against the person who previously had the job, Alan Kittleman, who served one term from 2014 to 2018, was only the second Republican county executive the county's ever had in its history. And Calvin Ball, of course, challenged him in 2018 and defeated him in the blue wave. And at that time, Calvin had been on the council for 12 years, and Alan Kittleman had been in state government and then county executive, of course. And from my understanding, I wasn't following politics as well as closely at that time. I was a bit younger, but Alan Kittleman did not have the best record when it came to development issues. He catered a lot to their interests, and some of those decisions may have even led to things like the old Ellicott City flooding. And so those decisions, his track record on development, zoning, and land use issues mixed with the blue wave, Calvin Ball was able to defeat him in 2018. But where the twist came in this cycle and made this cycle very different is Alan Kittleman really kind of marketed himself much differently. And now, because Calvin Ball is the incumbent, and Calvin Ball had spent 4 years really working in the interests of developers and had taken all that developer money, Alan Kittleman decided to contrast himself with that image of Calvin Ball as a corporate Democrat by sort of trying to paint Allen himself as like a grassroots populist candidate, and so he opted to use the Citizens Election Fund, which this is of course the first year that it's available, where if a candidate swears to not take any corporate donations, including from developers, and you only accept grassroots funds no greater than $250, you get matching donations from the public. And it was really historic that Alan Kittleman did this because no county executive had done it. By definition, it was the first term, and I don't think anybody expected any county executive candidate to do it, but nonetheless, Kittleman did this. And I don't know if he raised more than Calvin Ball, but I think he raised so much that he basically hit the limit of how much he could raise from the program. And so he raised, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not over $1 million here. I'm not sure if you know.
Yeah, I don't know the exact amount, but I think it was he did hit the limit. He raised a lot of money, and I really don't think any amount of money beyond what he raised would have helped his race. And I think the first thing is going forward, elections for county executive in Howard County will likely be decided during the Democratic primaries. I don't see any any Republican winning for the race for county executive here in the future. And just the demographic, the electorate, the party registration is heavily skewed toward the Democrats, and the Republicans, I think this year or last year, they made it, they bought into they spent a lot of their energy on library books and bashing gay people, and just really they weren't focused on zoning and land use. They weren't focused on schools, meaning Alan Kittleman, his campaign could have focused on the fact that the top 5 underperforming schools, elementary schools in Howard County, all in Columbia, and all have predominantly Black and brown children and low-income children. So there was no focus on that kind of stuff, on those kinds of important issues that people would care about. Those people, the people who would elect, who would vote, would care about. And there was just a lot of focus on crime, which is typical, like a Republican tactic, crime. They focused on SROs. They just the tip, standard GOP, operating, operating book. So this is not to say that there wasn't focus on developers and zoning and land use, but I don't think Alan sold that fully to the public, because there could have been more could have been done on that. And so I'm pretty sure, or I can't say I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't be surprised if the next in 4 years they would the GOP would fall into the same trap and focus on cultural issues rather than zoning and land use and schools and infrastructure, to to not get distracted with the cultural issues, and so that's why I don't think a Republican would be elected again in this county.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points. And yeah, I mean, that is essentially what happened is Alan Kittleman, although he did try to present himself to some degree as this grassroots populist, just juxtaposing himself to Calvin Ball being a corporate Democrat beholden to developers. Um, Alan also tried to kind of have it both ways and have his cake and eat it too, and do a little bit of that, but also, yeah, a little bit of throwing red meat to the Republican base on issues of immigration and whatnot, and trying to rile them up. And my takeaways are twofold: is one, that at least the Citizens Election Fund, you can be a viable candidate in the county executive race and have the funds to compete. It's not necessarily going to win it for you, just like it didn't win for Alan Kittleman, but Alan Kittleman absolutely had the money through grassroots donations alone to be competitive. And I tend to agree, if he hammered that grassroots message a little bit more, perhaps he would have done a little bit better. And for those at home, Alan, I was thinking, and maybe Hiruy was thinking too, that it was going to be kind of close. For a while, I was thinking, wow, Alan Kittleman might really do it. But as the election was getting closer, I was like, no, I think Calvin Ball's got this. But still, I thought it might be relatively close, but it ended up being, got the results here. Calvin Ball got 59% of the votes to Kittleman's 41%. So that's I want to call it a
Well,
landslide.
yeah, I wanted to add one more thing, Jake, because I really think this is probably one of the other main reasons why it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for a competitive race in general in this county, and the establishment candidate has a huge advantage. I think the fact that there's no media is in Howard County. There's no decent media in Howard County. It's really hurting the public interest. And there were a lot of improper is being generous to describe what happened. Lack of nearly the issues with the PIA, the public the public information requests, other improprieties that were reported, campaign finance violations in the tens of thousands, receiving beyond above the campaign limit from individual donors. All these things were left unreported, and I think that hurts the voter. And even to the extent that the elections could be decided in the Democratic primaries in the future, and a candidate that's not supported by the establishment will have a huge uphill battle if the establishment candidate, who is ostensibly corrupt, taking all kinds of money from special interests, has more influence. So that's another concerning thing, Jake.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. A lot of things that should have been scandals, quite frankly, were just either completely ignored by the media, or actively downplayed by the media. And the best we had to rely on was either groups like ours or local blogs like HOCO Watchdogs. And I appreciate HOCO Watchdogs and groups like ours, but it's a shame that we have to step up to do the job of multi-million dollar, if not billion-dollar funded media agencies. And so it's pretty hard to get the word out there. But with that being said, you know, I think even if there was a good local media that had been reporting, and even if Kittleman had pushed the grassroots message, you know, just the way that the voter registration numbers are in Howard County and the way that they're going to continue to keep trending, I question whether there was anything he could have done to win this race, or just if no matter what type of Republican candidate, no matter how you run, the days of a Republican being able to win in Howard County are over. And so I tend to agree with you that from this election forward, the real race in Howard County for county executive is the Democratic primary. And you're right, with the press not being really existent at all, or just outright, you know, going along with propaganda, then, you know, the establishment candidate's always going to be an advantage. But I will say that that is more so the case when you have a Democratic incumbent. But when you have, you know, next year or next cycle, 2026, it's going to be an open seat. So the press not being helpful is only an issue when they're ignoring things that an incumbent is doing that are bad, but that's not going to be the case in 2026. So the Democratic primary is really going to be one to watch. And my final takeaway of the executive race is kind of like Hiruy touched on, is like there really kind of seems to be absolutely no consequences for just outright illegal, corrupt, unethical behavior. I mean, accepting, you know, we have limits on how much money campaigns are supposed to be able to take from one single person or entity, and they're just you know, donating thousands of dollars over that, and these things are being reported and just not even a slap on the wrist to my knowledge. And so it makes me think, you know, the media is not going to save the day. The law seemingly isn't going to save the day. The only thing that can save the day is like if we get responsible people elected to that office 4 years from now. So here's to hoping that, you know, Liz Walsh or somebody of that cloth runs in 2026. But anything else to say on the executive race, or do you want to go to council?
Yeah, let's go to council. Maybe I'll touch on a couple of the races. I think just, you know, the D4, of course, we know that there was no it was not competitive. Deb Young ran unopposed in the general, and you know, we are of course you know, ecstatic that she was able to overcome that, you know, the primary against a corrupt establishment, corrupt, rancid establishment, and so that's good. D2 and D3, people should be aware that I mean, in District 2, you know, Opal Jones raised tens of thousands of dollars, starting from the primaries all the way through, and he didn't have any meaningful opponent all the way from, you know, from the primaries until now, and yet he raised all this money. And we should be asking ourselves why, because again, you know, there's in Howard County, there seems to be no consequence for, you know, these kinds of behaviors. And you know, under normal circumstances, you know, people will be out there, you know, with pitchforks, you know, because, you know, why is a council member who doesn't have any opponent, any meaningful opponent, raising tens of thousands of dollars from developers? 90% of his money came from developers, so that's concerning. D3, you know, Christiana Rigby, she didn't have, that's it's an uphill battle for a Republican there as well. And I'm not concerned. I am not convinced that even though she proffered, or she claimed that she was participating in the CEF program. I do think that's more for lip service, and that's performative, because we know how council members who participated in the CEF program vote on zoning and land use. And Christiana Rigby's zoning and land use record is atrocious. And so I have a difficult time believing that she's doing this because to advance the public interest or something like that. So so those, I think those are the easy ones. And I think of course D1 was also easy. It's good to Liz Walsh had, my joke was that her opponent really was convinced by her zoning and land use record that he felt like she's probably better in that role, and he voted for her. So that's how much that's how good she did in D1. So I wanted to touch on those and then let you talk about District 5.
Yeah, districts 1 through 4, say all safe Democratic districts. So it wasn't much of a race in any of them, even if some of them did have nominal Republican opponents. But also on your point about Christiana Rigby using the Citizens Election Fund, as people may know, I filed a complaint. She really should not have been able to use that fund based off both the spirit and the letter of the law, at least based on my interpretation. And not only does she have a different voting record than the other CEF candidates, namely, and she's voted in favor with everything the developers want, but she's also the only CEF candidate to have taken thousands of dollars from developers this past cycle, which should have made her not eligible to participate in the fund at all. So I'm hoping, again, this was the first cycle that this fund was used. So, they're a little bit lax on the enforcement of everything, but I'm hoping that that type of funny business is not allowed, because it really degrades the program. It's not fair to people who have truly complied with it. And it also, it allows candidates to unfairly use that label when it's not actually true. And then if enough candidates start to do that, the public will lose faith in the program, and that's terrible for democracy. And but on to District 5, which was the only real council race in the district, because it's the 5 council members. It's the only Republican district, rural, conservative, been long held by Republicans, but the last couple cycles it's gotten a little bit closer Democratic each time. China Williams got almost 46% of the vote, or about 46% of the vote in 2018, which was more than any other candidate had really done in the past. And then fast forward to 2020, they did a new round of redistricting because of the census. And now I think for the first time ever, at least in terms of voter registration numbers alone, District 5 is on paper majority Democratic. Now, Republicans tend to turn out more, so it wasn't a done deal, not by any means, that the district was now going to automatically flip to a Democrat. But luckily, we did recruit actually one of our members, Joan Pontius, to run, and she didn't even have a primary opponent, which don't know what the Democratic Central Committee was doing there. But nonetheless, we fielded her as a candidate, and not having a primary challenger, made it so she could fundraise, just focus on raising money. And she, of course, also used the Citizens Election Fund, which that was really, you want to talk historic qualifications for the CEF. I mean, that was, Alan Kittleman, it was impressive that he did it because he technically was not an incumbent and it was for county executive. So you have to hit a higher threshold. But Joan, he had at least been an elected official before and is from a political dynasty family. Joan was a complete political newbie to the scene. I mean, she had testified at things before, but never run for anything. And for her to not only qualify as a Citizens Election Fund candidate when everyone was saying no non-incumbents would be able to do it, but she did it in probably less than 2 months because she filed very last second, and then the deadline to qualify was like less than 2 months later. So she managed, partially with our help, to raise, like $10,000 of grassroots funds from at least 125 different county residents. And I think David Youngman, the Republican incumbent, who's, a real estate guy himself and very beholden to developers, and he serves as the third vote for developers on the county council. I think he was not expecting much of a challenge. I mean, would you agree with that, Hiruy? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he was expecting much of a challenge, and that was evidenced by the level of campaigning activity that was being done. I don't, we knocked on a lot of doors, some Republican doors too, and we didn't see any campaign literature for Youngman. Yard signs are not any indicator of anybody, how successful a campaign is, but to the extent that it's, it's something that's done, we never saw any, that many of them as well for someone who's an incumbent who has, who seemed to have, it seemed like he had more of an organization in 2018 than he did this time. And another major indicator was he ended up getting significant amount of developer dollars toward the end. So after the developer allies that also contribute to the county executive, who's a Democrat, which it's very important here because David Youngman is a Republican, Calvin Ball is a Democrat. They're both contributing to them. But they decided they didn't think that it was his seat was under threat initially, but when they felt like it was, they gave, he got a sudden, a huge amount of cash injection from them toward the end, which shows that there was, there were no major concerns until the end.
Yeah, and so he started. Because I think it was starting to become clear that, wow, this Joan Pontius kind of came out of nowhere and has a pretty legitimate campaign here and has like $50,000 raised and hasn't spent a lot of it and has a lot of door knockers. And I think he started to sweat a little bit, which was, quite frankly, pretty fun to experience, as progressives, we're always the underdog. So it was nice to be able to see in real time him panicking, but really it was the establishment panicking, because although he's the only Republican on the council, he was also the swing vote to give the developers their majority. So this seat was about more than just, getting Democratic control of the council. It was also, winning back the control of the county council for the community. And so there's a lot riding on it. And we came close, and at the last second, all the developer money comes into David, and not only is he sending his mailers, attack mailers, but literally bought not only TV commercial ads for his campaign, but TV attack ads featuring Joan Pontius trying to spin her as some radical communist or something like that. And I've literally never seen anything I thought I saw commercial ads for the Board of Ed race in 2020, but not attack ads. That was a first for me. So, long story short, Joan did not win, but she got about 48% of the vote, which was more than any other Democrat. had ever gotten in that district, which again is pretty astounding for a first-time candidate who ran, like a 3 to 6 month short-term campaign. So my major takeaways is one, don't sleep on grassroots organizing. It really can be effective, and a strong, I guess my takeaway from any race that we ever knock doors in, it doesn't matter if you're in rural District 5, if you're more urban District 4, or if you're in Ellicott City in District 1 or whatever. The message of getting corporate and developer money out of our politics is very attractive to Democratic voters, to Republican voters, to independent voters. And so that is a very popular message that can move votes, but it's still, with that being said, it's just like with the county executive race. People can sometimes like what a candidate says, but a certain percentage of people are just not willing to cross over party lines. And so, unlike with the county executive race, where I don't think any amount of good messaging could have won that race for a Republican, I do think it's close. It's close enough in District 5 where a strong Democrat with good grassroots messaging can pull it off. Maybe next cycle, maybe Joan Pontius again, maybe somebody else. But District 5, I think, is going to fall to a Democrat at some point. And let's just hope it's a grassroots one. I don't know if you had anything to say about the District 5 race.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Jake. I wanted to add that it was really good to see a lot of young people, early 20s, on working on this campaign, who, if I'm not mistaken, probably came around to the importance of zoning and land use as a focus due to this campaign, and it was just really good to see that was the case.
Yeah, no, and special shout out to Ian Miller from Baltimore County, young activist who really knows what he's doing, and helped manage Joan's campaign towards the end, and brought in a lot of young people, some of who do live in Howard County, to help with that. And I think it was eye-opening, and they're going to take what they learned, because that's the thing about zoning and land use issues. And as we saw with our last podcast episode with the Prince George's County Board of Education members, is the developers run the same playbook in the different counties. It's just the projects are slightly different. But once you see it in one setting, it's very easy to identify it, and you start to realize, like, wow, this is literally most of the issues at a county level. This is where hundreds of millions of dollars are being misappropriated. And so, yeah, that was also a good experience. And then the last thing on District 5 I'll say is, you mentioned the joke about Liz Walsh being such a good candidate, even her opponent voted for her. Well, the joke that I kept hearing about Liz Walsh is that Liz is working harder on Joan Pontius's campaign than on her own. And so I want to give a special thank you to Liz Walsh, because I can't tell you how many times incumbents are like, oh yeah, I'd support that candidate, like that they're good, but I'm not going to say anything publicly because, like, I don't want to, like, jeopardize this or that relationship. But Liz Walsh really is the real deal, and it takes a lot of courage to just really do what's right regardless of the fallout, because you need to do what's best for the county. And it's really refreshing to have elected official like that, and one who's actually my council member. So with that, you want to go to state delegate and board of ed, Hiruy?
Yeah, I was thinking we cover those two, and there's the reason will become clear. So I think probably the notable results from that are the D9 results in district for state delegate, where Cha Wu and Natalie Ziegler were able to win their seats, their races. They were able to unseat Trent Kittleman, and they will be I think they probably were sworn in today or this week, and so congratulations to them. The part it seemed like the part, at least from my point of view, that was uncertain was Chow Wu had, what differentiates him from other candidates is, he's an immigrant, and he also, he has a good amount of base from the Chinese American community. My concern was that it could be split because one of his opponents in the Republican from the Republican opponents was also Chinese American, and that could potentially split their vote there, benefiting the either Trent Kittleman or some other scenario, but that didn't materialize, and so that was good. And for people may know that he was in the BOE, and he served one term in the BOE, and he went to and he ran in the state delegate race. In the Board of Education, well, before I go to the Board of Education, did you want to add did you have any thoughts about the state delegate race?
Yeah, just I was more supportive in the primary of Steve Bolin and Chow Wu more so than Natalie Ziegler, namely because Natalie was the one candidate who refused to sign the no developer donation pledge, and also she's a direct descendant of the Carroll family, slave owning Carroll family, and so I was disappointed to see Steve Bolin not make it past the primary, because both Steve and Natalie actually came very close in 2018 to flipping those seats blue. But nonetheless, even though it wasn't Steve, I was happy to see both of those seats flip blue, leaving David Youngman as the last sole Republican in Howard County. I really don't think Natalie's election is going to fundamentally change anything, but I think that Chow Wu, through his time on the Board of Education, has really shown himself willing to be an independent-minded thinker. I guess I have a little bit more to say about, the Chinese voting base, but I could probably speak on that after the Board of Education race, because it's relevant there as well. But I'm really looking forward to working with Chow Wu, and friend of the club Alan Schneider's working for him. So it's good to have another ally in Annapolis to the grassroots cause.
Yeah, I think same here. I'm happy that Chow managed to win his race. I supported him, and he was in the BOE race. The two people who won their campaigns, I think they were. I would describe the candidates as follows. There were two who were in the Board of Education race. There were two who were supported by the establishment, Dan Newberger and Jackie McCoy. There were two who I wouldn't describe them as being supported by the establishment, but they did have support from a lot of people, what appeared to be, to the extent that they were sending those signals, who appeared to be concerned about the SRO issue, and books and library books. Um, um, uh, and so and they were not supported by the Democratic Party. Ultimately, Lin Fang Chen and Jackie McCoy won their race, but it seemed it was I was based on history, the candidates supported by the establishment have a really good chance. So that actually, you know, the results were kind of surprising, but I also think they were the voter, the school system, the students are probably better off for it than had both the establishment candidates won. And before I say why that's a good thing, did you want to add? Did you want to talk about? Did you want to have any? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I was gonna say earlier with the Chinese voting base, which I think is just gonna be continually growing block in Howard County, and this is now the second or third election cycle in a row where they've really, flexed their muscles and gotten somebody from their community elected kind of even when faced with like some pretty overwhelming odds and a lot of things working against them. And we saw that twice this cycle with Chow Wu's like last second election. That was the mail-in ballots put him over the line on like the last day of counting by like less than 100 votes. So that was very close, but nonetheless he pulled it off. He pulled it off when he won his first seat on the Board of Education at large. And then Lin Feng Chen, I'm with you here. I was expecting the establishment candidates Dan Newberger and Jackie McCoy to win just based off, the primary results, based off like the social media operations, based off the teachers union endorsements. I thought were really gonna go a long way. So I was surprised, pleasantly surprised that Lin Feng won. I actually voted for Lin Feng and Jackie, so I picked the winners in that race. But I can't help but think, two reasons why Lin Feng won, and what was the other lady's name? The right wing lady.
Tootie Adler.
Yeah, the reason why, even though Lin Feng and Tootie kind of ran together a little bit, the reason why he did so much better than her is two reasons. One, although he did do a little bit more culture war stuff than I would have liked, he also signed the no developer donation pledge, and he was also willing to speak out on zoning and land use issues. And I do think you get more crossover appeal, whereas Tootie Adler was absolutely not willing to sign that pledge or speak on those issues. And she was a culture warrior. So I think that's one takeaway, is that again, the zoning and land use stuff and being grassroots funded does resonate with people and is worth a couple thousand votes at least. And also, again, the Chinese, voting base and volunteer base and the community really coming out to support Lin Feng. And the reason I bring up the Chinese voting base, and I think this goes for other immigrant communities as well, is, they're really getting mobilized in Howard County and starting to get more involved on the local issues. And I think the Democratic Party is at a crossroads here of, as we mentioned in this podcast, I think the Republican Party is growing irrelevant. But, one thing that could make them relevant is if new communities start to register as Republicans in overwhelming numbers. And so, it's a question of, as a Democratic Party, as some of these communities, including immigrant communities, start to get more politically mobilized, do we want to have a message that appeals to them and brings them into the party and, gives them a seat at the table and makes them feel represented and listened to? Or do we want to alienate them and make them feel not welcomed and make them basically reactionary and run to the open arms of the Republican Party? And I really fear that the local Democratic Party is doing a lot of things to alienate the Chinese community. And we see with these races, Chao Wu's interesting because he's a Democrat, and Lin Fang, some of them would argue, is more Republican. And it's like, even if that's the case, these people can still be worked with. They're still good, honest people, even if they're not as left wing always. But if we alienate them and treat them horribly, then they're gonna move more towards the Republicans. So I think that's something to keep in mind over the next election cycle or two.
Yeah, I agree, Jake, and I think the track record so far has been that the Democratic Party has, in Howard County, has alienated a lot of the immigrant community, specifically the Chinese and the Indian American community, and so there needs to be work done there. I think people, so after the elections, we recall that the state delegation introduced this terrible bill that would dismantle the Board of Education, and at the Board of Education, sometimes the board votes on legislation to give a sense of whether they support it or not. It doesn't have, it's a resolution, like they vote on or resolution of support or not non-support or whatever it may be. And the board, the BOE, took one such vote when the state delegation introduced the bill to dismantle the Board of Education, and had the two establishment candidates won. I think the resolution that was introduced calling for the withdrawal of the bill would have failed, and that's because the establishment candidates would have voted with the establishment, and the importance of electing candidates who are not beholden to that machine was immediately highlighted right after the elections, in the Board of Education, and we should note also that not a single candidate for state delegate and state senator campaigned on dismantling the Board of Education, and I thought it was important to point out, related to that race, to that campaign, or to the election campaign leading up to election day. So the election of the new slate of state delegates got elected, and Delegate Courtney Watson and State Senator Clarence Lamb immediately proceeded to introduce legislation that would dismantle the Board of Education, and and a proposal that they didn't campaign on, and then the new board of BOE voted, and I think for the most part, my recollection is that they voted for the withdrawal of the bill in the current form before the amendments, and I don't see anyone out there supporting the amendment as well. So it illustrates how elections have consequences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously we can't look into an alternate universe and see how things would have played out otherwise. But, I would basically bet my life that if one, if Alan Kittleman had won for county executive, this bill never would have been introduced. And two, I question if Dan Newberger had won instead of Lin Feng Chen, maybe this bill also would have not been introduced. Maybe it still would have been introduced for all I know, but I tend to think not. And so it's like, what was it, like less than 2 weeks after the election they introduced this thing? Yeah, and so, it just shows how the establishment, they plan ahead and they have plans and they have backup plans in case plan A doesn't work. And so, as soon as they saw that, their guy won and their other guy didn't win, let's change the structure of things so that we can, like, put our finger on the scale, like how it should be, how it always is. And we'll see if the bill does get passed, even with the public backlash. It wouldn't shock me. I'm hoping it doesn't, but we'll see. But my takeaways is that we, as grassroots activists, we got to start playing by those rules too, and we got to start planning ahead and getting out of things. And so revisiting everything. Yeah, there's some minor changes in the structure of the, power structure of the BOE, minor changes in the state delegate, but county executive, county council, where a lot of the decisions are made, that's all going to stay the same as it's been the past 4 years. So I think grassroots activists need to ask themselves, are we going to take the same approach that we took the last 4 years and get the same results, which is very little for the people and a ton for corporate interests? Or are we going to change our approach, do things a little bit differently, do things more strategically, work together more, and be a little bit more aggressive too, and hopefully get some things done, and set ourselves up well for the 2026 elections, which is the next opportunity to really flip the chessboard on them. So I mean, those are all my takeaways. You got anything else, Hiruy?
Not too much more. I think I would continue to emphasize the need to focus on zoning and land use and not get distracted by the establishments and the moneyed interest cynical attempts to to pit people against each other. Yes, there are natural divisions. Yes, there are natural disagreements on issues, and I think people, when they talk about this one-on-one, they're able to have those those disagreements in a good way, in a civil way, in a productive way. But when it comes to the tactic of giving out an outsized airtime or attention to the cultural and social issues has it actually hurts those social and cultural issues, because just to give an example, if the Democratic Party in Howard County claims to support equity, diversity, and all of that stuff, except the county is economically segregated. Some of the lowest performing schools in the county are, where predominantly Black and brown people attend. And so where is that? Like, where is that in action? Where is that care in action? And we don't see that. And the other thing is, even on issues that affect the LGBTQ people, from the GOP's point of view, nobody cared about these books until some outside group came and started talking about the books. They've been there for forever, but somehow it's become an issue. And it seems it's clear that there's somebody out, the special interest groups don't want us to talk about how the politicians are managing the money, and so we need to focus on that. And I'm hoping that that would be the increase. There would be increased focus on that from all sides of the political spectrum, which I think will make us much stronger as an electorate.
Yeah, I think the name of the game with the establishment is divide and conquer, keep the people separated and bickering amongst themselves over not even necessarily minor issues, but just issues that don't affect them as much as what the establishment does on a daily basis, which is, running out of the back room with, hundreds of millions or sometimes billions of our taxpayer dollars and getting very, very, very wealthy off of it while we're, arguing amongst ourselves. So hopefully we can continue to coalition build and, be the people in Plato's cave, showing them the light and, showing people the real issues that need to be focused on and not to fall for the distractions. And we're seeing an instance of this play out right now with the Rouse Project 2.0 with the Columbia Association elections and Queen Lakey Boyd apparently over in the CA where they're doing the same sort of playbook. And so we'll see what this next year holds and what these next 4 years hold. But thank you everybody for tuning in with us for a very exciting 2022. We didn't get everything that we wanted, Hiruy, but I'm personally very proud of the impact that our club was able to have between the podcast episodes, informing the public, us running for Central Committee slate, the no developer donation pledge that got over 20 cans to sign, almost getting Joan elected, and most importantly, protecting Deb Young's re-election campaign. So that's all I have. And anything else?
Nope, that's all I have. I think I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we were going to point out the positives, and those are the positives. Really, is there's reason to be encouraged, but we need to do more. So we just gotta keep pushing forward.
Yep, let's keep up the progressive organizing momentum, everybody. And as always, if you want to follow Progressive Democrats of Howard County on social media, subscribe to our email list, become a dues paying member, etc. You can do all of that and more on our link tree. The URL is linktr.ee/HOCO progressives. This has been episode 23 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast, and see you all next time.